Hi, this is Dularasil, and this is going to be another mech showcase video similar to the Berserker showcase video that I made before. I'm going to show a basic build and a few gameplay clips, and then maybe mention kind of some basic strategies, with the intention that if you're a new player and you haven't played this mech before, that like this is the kind of jump start you need to be able to start playing it. In this case, we are going to be looking at the Marauder. The Marauder does have a little more of a change when it comes to switching out different primary weapons. So unlike the Berserker video, I am going to be doing two separate builds. I'll show you one with the Seeker primary option, and another one with the T32 bolt primary option. So let's start off by talking about the ability. The description that the game gives says that it highly increases your run speed for a short duration and rapidly drains fuel while active. One issue with this is that the short duration comment implies that there is a set duration when there is not at all for this ability. When you activate it, there's no timer that counts down or anything. There's two things that are going to end the ability. Either you press the ability button again to manually end it, or you run out of fuel. Otherwise, it just keeps going and going and going. You continue running very fast. With fuel converters providing you with additional fuel, you can keep this ability up for an incredibly long time. There's going to be a link in the description to a video where with the use of a 3-slot fuel converter and a 3-slot fail-safe device, I'm able to do an entire lap around the frontline map. So you can make it last for a very long time because of that fact that it doesn't have a set duration. It's just until your fuel runs out or you choose to deactivate it yourself, which is an important thing to do every once in a while because sometimes you'll activate your ability and either you close that distance you were planning on closing, your enemy runs away faster than even your ability can chase them. Something happens that makes it no longer a good thing that your ability is active. Press it again, turn it off. Don't let it drain your fuel and use up resources if it's not actually helping you. So that's kind of another thing. Though it does have a cooldown, a set cooldown duration. I think it's like 17 seconds. So I'll say first off that I think the Seeker version is by far the easier one to play, and is arguably better. And I'll get into that a little more when I do talk about the T32 bolt version and what's good and what's bad about it. But Seeker is kind of the more general use build on this mech. So the first build we're going to look at is going to be the Seeker version of the Marauder. So the main strengths of the Seeker are high range. It's a more consistent damage. It's a constant drip rather than the spikier kind of firing rate of the T32 bolt. It's also the best weapon available to the Marauder for self-damaging for the purpose of making your ability last longer. Sometimes it's the right decision to do damage to yourself to make your ability last longer. Though those times are probably few and far between. If you played an entire match with the Marauder and you were using your ability a lot, there still only might be like one or two 2 to 3 second instances where you might want to self-damage. But looking out for those opportunities is, I think, not only one of the best ways to get all the strength you can out of the Seeker version of the Marauder, but also one of the best ways to have fun with the Seeker Marauder, because it's a very unique kind of gameplay action that you don't really do on a lot of other mechs, and definitely not to this much benefit. I when I play Siege, I shoot the ground plenty when I'm running EU back to my base in order to, if I run out of fuel and I want to keep boosting. But for the most part, in combat, I don't shoot the ground very often on anything other than Seeker Marauder. So next we're going to take a look at internals and items. I will say that these are very, very flexible, especially on the Seeker version, and I want to kind of encourage you as the player to fiddle around with these a bit. I think the only strong, in all caps, bolded, underlined recommendation I would give is fuel converter. Some level of fuel converter is a must for the reasons we kind of discussed in its interaction with the ability. I normally don't go lower than two slots, but one can work. One might be fine, especially when you're playing, a 1,000 health mech like this. Um, this particular build I have set up has a armor fuser as its main defensive option. I think this is pretty good on Marauder specifically. Um, for a couple of reasons. You're gonna take some self damage probably if anyone gets up in your face because you don't have any weapons that don't have an explosion to them. So the armor fuser can really help you survive skirmishes and scraps when you do get in them. And it's also just a really good way to kind of equalize and create an attrition situation when you're using those seekers to apply pressure from afar while also yourself healing up a bit. You're dealing steady damage, and anyone who tries to deal steady damage back to you is probably going to be at a health deficit to you in the long run. And then other basics, I've got an air compressor because the air compressor is kind of a must. I have an Air 180 here, which also a must for me at the very least. But I actually think this is one of the better mechs to run an Air 180 on, just simply because of the amount of benefit that you get from flying above your enemies. So once again, this can really help with skirmishes. You're trying to shoot down at somebody. Their response is to boost straight under you. You Air 180. You never stop shooting them. You keep the pressure up. You continue, using offense as your best defense. I think the Air 180 is really, really good on like Seeker Marauder, grenade jobs. Really, any mech that wants to fly and also that wants to like shoot directly down at someone, I think the Air 180 is great on. But don't let me evangelize that too much. Go ahead and switch that for either your third slot of armor fuser. Maybe you can put a basic deflectors. You could, I don't know. There's a few options. Power Surger could be fun. Failsafe could be nice for kind of the synergy with your ability. Experiment with this. I think that the Seeker Marauder is the version that has the most flexibility in how you play it, and that you're gonna have the most fun playing. I think treating this mech like an experimental mech. Like this is a mech where you're trying to interact with its unique mechanics as much as possible, and I think that's when you're gonna have the most fun. And then as far as items, I go very, very defensive on this mech. The repair charge helps for your long range and your skirmishes. Like I said, the shield is just good because it gives you. For all the reasons the shield is good, it blocks shots when you're being flanked by someone. It can be used to like force your opponent who's in front of you to charge you at times when that would be advantageous to you. I mean, there's a million reasons shield is good. So I run shield and repair charge on this mech, and I think it does a pretty good job at sort of the heavy skirmisher archetype of play. There's not a lot of strategic complexity to note with the Marauder, the Seeker version at the very least. For the most part, you're trying to shoot people with Seekers and apply pressure. When you get into trouble, your ability is largely going to be used as an escape on this version. It's just really good to essentially activate the ability, walk backwards really fast while someone chases you and you shoot at them. It's sort of like the opposite of like the Raider, where the nice thing about the Raider is that you can boost forward and shoot someone at the same time. The nice thing about this one is that you can run backward and shoot someone at the same time. Other thing to note is that getting above people is good. You have two separate splash damage weapons. If you get above someone, you get more consistent damage. And for the most part, that's about it. You're a high pressure mech. This build has lots of healing for like sustained fighting, and and you've got access to a really strong escape in your ability. And if you get above someone like this, your damage is insane. That's the Seeker Marauder. Okay, now we're going to jump over to the T-32 Bolt Marauder. There's a couple of things to note about the weapon. First is that you can do a charge up similar to the EOC or the Breacher. What that does is it's gonna the charge shot deals more damage than an uncharged shot and also has better effective range because it's got a tighter spread. It's more heat efficient to do consecutive charge shots than it is to do consecutive uncharged shots, but the consecutive uncharged shots are more DPS. So, another thing to note. When it comes to the internals and items, I'm going to be a little more rigid than with the Seeker Marauder, where I was kind of like, experiment, have some fun with it. This one, I don't think is actually lends itself much to experimentation. I think there's a couple of things you really want for the build, and most everything else is not nearly as good as those couple of things you want. So the two main ones are going to be the basic air compressor and the Air 180. I install these two on literally every mech. Though usually I do include some kind of a alternate recommendation for the Air 180 because I know most people don't like it. A third slot of deflectors would be good. A single slot of armor fuser would be good. Power surger might be fun. But for the most part, the 2 slots of fuel converter and the 2 slots of deflectors I'm going to recommend really, really highly. This is a mech that is very much about like punching through an enemy team, so you need proactive defense like deflectors rather than kind of after the fact defense like armor fusers. So that's why I want to say like use deflectors. It's good for your approach. You will have to make an approach because you are running a dual shotgun mech. You have to get close. Deflectors are going to help you get there. And then fuel converter because, well, we're playing Marauder and we have our ability, and a fuel converter is just amazingly good synergy with it. So this is my core build I'm going to recommend. You can flirt with it a little bit, but I will say like I'm recommending this much more highly and much more rigidly than I was with the Seeker build. Then, when it comes to items, I like to use the portable scanner and the blockade. Once again, I'm going to be a little more rigid about these than I was on the Seeker. Portable scanner, I think, is just one of the best items in the game, if not the best item in the game. But it's especially good on any mech that wants to play kind of like peekaboo or like slat boxing kind of gameplay, where you have like high burst damage and you generally aren't necessarily just about like assaults probably don't get quite as much out of scanners, but if you are in any way trying to set up an ambush with like a high spike damage weapon, then I think scanners are really good for making sure that you can kind of like hide around those corners and make those plays happen. As far as the blockade, some of the clips are going to show a few instances of where the blockade is good on the Marauder specifically, but I love the blockade on this mech. It's really good synergy with your ability. If you are using your ability and moving forward and you drop a blockade, that blockade will come up behind you without any sort of like special boost timing or anything having to be figured out. Like you just walk forward with your ability on, drop a blockade, that blockade's gonna come up behind you, which is a really good escape method. But more importantly, and what I end up using the blockade for more, is as deployable cover. We are once again playing a build that has high spike damage, but really poor sustain damage. So we want our fights to have small windows of damage trades. We're not trying to stand in front of someone else while they stand in front of us and we both just shoot each other. We want to shoot, get behind cover while we charge up our next T-32 bolt shot and wait for our Corsair to come back, pop out, shoot. Once again, I'll show this a little more. There's a decent fight with Sethery where I do this in the clips. But yeah, Blockade, Scanner, I recommend these both very highly. They're very important toward making the much more narrow game plan of the T-32 Bolt Marauder succeed, which is that you need to get ambushes and you need to be able to control your engagements and make it so that you can deal burst damage rather than taking sustained damage, because you don't have sustained damage to throw back at anybody. So as we jump into gameplay here, I'll mention a couple of weaknesses that I think makes this harder to play than the Seeker version. One is that if you do want to get into this dual shotgun mode here, your effective range is very, very poor, and also your aim is super, super crucial, as you can see with all these missed shots. Because you have really slow fire rates for both of your weapons. You have really slow, or you have no splash damage. So any hits you get are going to be because you aimed perfectly, and any misses you get are going to be punished heavily because your next shot is going to be much farther behind than, you know, the assault who's just holding down the fire button. He doesn't care if some of his shots miss because you know, the next shot is a tiny fraction of a second later. Also, when your ability is active, you run faster than a tank mode mech can turn. So you have a really, really good matchup against them with this mech. In fact, I play this mech mostly to bully tank mode, mostly to bully tank mode mechs and try and get them off my back. Rocketeer, I think, is one of our better matchups because the Seeker actually provides a really good rate of DPS for keeping our ability up, but not enough damage to necessarily threaten our 980 health pool. We're also a lot faster than most heavy mechs. I think the Vanguard could potentially be faster, but even it might not be. I'm sure, once again, I always kind of count on Tarman coming in and fact-checking me on at least one of the things I say here, but the Marauder is very, very fast, even with the ability not active, compared to other heavy mechs. So here's going to be kind of a display of what I like about the barrier as a form of deployable cover in order to help your game plan work better. Because I have spike damage, he's got sustained damage from his assault rifle and the much faster firing TOW. So if I hadn't thrown up that barrier and gotten a couple of those shots in, I wouldn't have been able to win that fight, and I would have died. When your back is against the wall, I also think that this mech is very good, just because you have so much burst potential that you often have the option when you're in trouble to turn and fight and potentially win, just because of how ridiculous your damage output is, especially if your opponent is getting a little cocky because they're like, oh, this guy's almost dead, I'm gonna kill him, and then they don't dodge and suddenly they get hit by this huge burst damage combo, and they're not as ahead in the fight as they thought they were. So here's just going to be a couple more clips kind of showcasing that this thing deals insane damage. It's kind of an assassin. It is not a sustained fight mech. It is you find someone and you kill them quickly and then you move on. And that's about it. I think most anything else you might learn, you'll learn from just playing it. So hope to see you out there, and give Marauder a shot.